It began on an ordinary autumn evening, one that promised nothing more than a quiet night in the life of David Miller, an unassuming young man with a routine as predictable as the ticking of a clock. David was known to be reliable, a diligent student, a caring son, and a friend whose gentle smile could brighten even the darkest day. Yet that night, as the amber light faded into shadow, an inexplicable darkness seeped into every corner of his world. David had left home with the usual casual cheer, his phone buzzing with the mundane chatter of friends and reminders of his schedule. His family, accustomed to his punctual returns, expected nothing amiss. But as hours passed and the night deepened, an unsettling silence replaced the comforting regularity of his presence. When he finally failed to return, his absence echoed like a missing note in a familiar melody, a dissonance that grew louder with every minute. In the quiet of his room, where just moments ago the gentle hum of a life in progress had been evident, there now lay an eerie stillness. David's belongings, meticulously arranged and imbued with the essence of his everyday routine, were left untouched, as though frozen in time. The most jarring sight was his phone, its screen shattered into a chaotic mosaic of reflective fragments, each shard catching a glimpse of a world suddenly out of balance. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of a frantic departure, only a void, heavy and oppressive, as if the very room had inhaled the life from it. As the minutes bled into hours, a creeping dread began to clutch at the hearts of those who loved him. His family, initially hopeful that he might simply have lost track of time, soon realized that something far more sinister was unfolding. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, a cold metronome to the mounting terror that each passing second brought. In the silence, every object in the room, an abandoned mug of now cold coffee, a textbook left open on a page of calculations, a framed photograph capturing happier moments, seemed to whisper a grim narrative of sudden, inexplicable absence. The local authorities were summoned, their search beginning with meticulous care. Yet, despite their efforts, the investigation turned up nothing that could explain how a man could vanish so completely. David's room, the last known anchor to his existence, provided no clues beyond the shattered phone and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. It was as if he had been erased from the tapestry of life, leaving behind only fragments of a reality that once was. Rumors began to circulate among neighbors and friends, faint, dark murmurs of the impossible, of a force that might have snatched him away from our world. Whispers of supernatural interference, of a malevolent presence that defied the natural order, threaded through the community like a chilling wind. The normalcy of David's life, his gentle smile and steady habits, stood in stark contrast to the terrifying enigma that now shrouded his disappearance. In that forsaken room, where every ticking second deepened the void of unanswered questions, an oppressive feeling took root, a sense that his disappearance was not merely a tragic accident or a case of mistaken absence, but something far more sinister. The broken phone, its screen a shattered portal to a world that David once inhabited, hinted at the beginning of an unfathomable horror. A silent message from beyond, a spectral whisper carried on the currents of an unseen realm. Each object, every lingering shadow, testified to the sudden rupture of normal life, a life that had been abruptly severed from the warmth of familiarity. The very atmosphere was heavy with dread, as if the air itself mourned the loss of David Miller and warned of the dark, uncharted forces that might be at work. In that stillness, his absence transformed into a harbinger of an impending terror, a prelude to the strange and unexplainable events that would soon cast a chilling pall over his family's world. Days bled into weeks, and as the initial shock of David's disappearance faded, an overwhelming sense of urgency and despair took its place. His family, desperate for any sign of him, launched an exhaustive search that stretched the boundaries of hope and rationality. Every day, the empty room where David had last been seen stared back like a silent indictment, a haunting reminder that something was terribly amiss. The investigation began in earnest, with local law enforcement combing through every conceivable lead. Officers meticulously searched his apartment, looking for any clue that might hint at where he had gone. They pored over every piece of evidence, the shattered phone, the untouched personal items, even the faint traces of his cologne lingering in the air. Yet every avenue led to a dead end. No fingerprints were disturbed, no signs of a struggle marred the serene order of his belongings, and there was not even a whisper of a message left behind, aside from the cryptic, fractured remnants on his broken phone. As the official investigation stalled, David's family took desperate measures. They hired private investigators, individuals whose eyes were trained to see what others might miss. These investigators canvassed neighborhoods, interviewed acquaintances, and distributed countless flyers bearing David's familiar smile. Still, each tip evaporated like mist in the morning light. Every call turned out to be a false lead. Every hopeful whisper in the wind dissipated into silence. It felt as though David had been swallowed by the earth itself, leaving behind a void that no search party could fill. In their desperation, the family even turned to the unorthodox. Rumors had long circulated in hushed tones about those who could bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Psychics and mediums were consulted, their cryptic messages offering little more than vague prophecies and eerie coincidences. One night, as tears blurred their vision, a renowned psychic claimed to have sensed David's spirit wandering in a place where the veil between life and death was perilously thin. The psychic's words were both a comfort and a curse, fueling the family's hope while deepening the mystery of his vanishing. Then, in a moment that would forever shatter any semblance of normalcy, an unexpected text message arrived. It came from David's phone number, an anomaly that sent a ripple of disbelief through the already shattered hearts of his family. The message was brief, but every word cut like a shard of ice. "I'm not lost. I'm trapped. They won't let me leave." It was a message that defied all logic, arriving from a device that should have been silent, a device that had lain dormant in the cold isolation of his abandoned room. In that instant, the search took a surreal turn. The police, initially skeptical, scrambled to trace the origin of the message. Digital experts examined the phone's last known location, and the trace led them to a place that sent a chill through every investigator. A dense, foreboding forest on the outskirts of town, a place David had visited as a child. The idea that his final, desperate message could have originated from such a place was as unnerving as it was inexplicable. How could a man, who had seemingly vanished without a trace, be sending out a plea for help from a location so steeped in eerie folklore and mystery? The family's hope was rekindled, albeit with an undercurrent of dread. They organized search parties, venturing into the forest with heavy hearts and trembling hands. Under the gnarled boughs and amidst the encroaching fog, every rustle of leaves, every distant sound of breaking twigs was laden with the possibility of David's presence. The forest, however, offered little in the way of comfort. Instead, it seemed to envelop them in an otherworldly silence, its dense canopy swallowing all light and hope. Days turned into a disorienting blur as the searchers combed the forest floor, only to be met with footprints that hinted at his passage, footprints that vanished as mysteriously as they appeared. The deeper they delved, the more the forest revealed its uncanny nature. The paths twisted unexpectedly, as if deliberately leading the searchers in circles. Every lead was a dead end. Every whispered hope was quickly replaced by the oppressive realization that the forest itself was complicit in David's disappearance. The weight of these unanswered questions, coupled with the haunting message from beyond, gnawed at the hearts of those left behind. The family oscillated between desperate hope and suffocating despair, clinging to the fragile possibility that the message was a sign, a final, spectral cry from David, trapped in a realm that defied understanding. And yet, with every passing moment, the chilling silence of unanswered questions grew louder, drowning out the once bright hope of a reunion. In the end, the search yielded no concrete answers, only a cascade of eerie clues that deepened the mystery. The shattered phone, the inexplicable message, and the foreboding forest all wove together into a tapestry of supernatural terror, a stark reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be resolved. The case of David Miller's disappearance morphed into something far more disturbing than a simple missing person report. It became an enigma that straddled the thin line between the living and the dead, a riddle whispered in the dark, where every unanswered question beckoned with the promise of further dread. In the dead of night, when the world outside lay hushed under a blanket of oppressive silence, the shattered phone in David's abandoned room suddenly sprang to life. Amid the darkness and despair that had enveloped his home since his disappearance, the screen flickered with a ghostly glow, displaying a single chilling text message. The words were stark and unadorned, yet carried an unimaginable weight. "I'm not lost. I'm trapped. They won't let me leave." For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze, the harsh glow of the message slicing through the silence like a shard of ice. At first, David's family believed it to be a cruel prank, a sick attempt to manipulate their grief. But as the shock of denial faded, a cold, creeping realization took hold. The message had come from his own phone, the very device that had lain untouched in his room. The timestamp confirmed that it was sent in the dead hours of the night, when mischief or malice from a living soul seemed impossible. It was as if David, or something bearing his name and voice, had reached out from a realm beyond the ordinary, a desperate cry echoing from the void between life and death. Authorities were summoned at once. Digital forensic experts pored over the remnants of data, trying desperately to trace the origin of the message. Their efforts, however, met with baffling interference, a digital dead end that defied every conventional explanation. The message, it turned out, had been dispatched from a location that technology could not neatly pinpoint. Instead, the only clue left behind was an address embedded deep within the metadata. A dense, forbidding forest on the edge of town, a place steeped in dark local legends and whispered curses, and one where David had spent many a childhood day. As the family grappled with mounting terror, another line materialized on the screen, a final, soul-crushing plea that sent fresh waves of dread crashing over them. "Help me, before they take me too." Those 4 words, scrawled in the same cold, unyielding typeface, resonated like a death knell. What did they mean? Who were they that could ensnare him so completely? The message was not merely a cry for rescue, it was a forewarning, a harbinger of forces unseen and malevolent, lurking in the shadows of that accursed forest. In the days that followed, the shattered remnants of normalcy were replaced by an ever-deepening nightmare. Paranormal investigators, digital experts, and desperate family members converged on the case, all drawn into the vortex of mystery that had suddenly upended their lives. Every attempt to decode the message, to understand the uncanny interference that had allowed it to bypass the laws of technology, only deepened the enigma. It was as if the forest itself had imbued the phone with a supernatural energy, a dark bridge connecting our world to something far more sinister, a realm where the boundaries of life and death blurred into an endless twilight. Late at night, when the winds moaned through empty streets and every shadow seemed to whisper secrets of the beyond, those left behind could almost hear David's voice echoing from the depths of the phone's broken screen, a plea for liberation from a trap he could not escape, a trap woven by forces that defied mortal understanding. The chilling message had transcended the ordinary. It had become a spectral warning, an omen that something malevolent had reached out from the darkness to claim him. And as the final words lingered in the minds of those who dared to read them, one terrible question remained. How could a missing person's phone send a message from the dead? And what unspeakable horrors awaited them in the shadows of that forsaken forest? Desperation drove David's family and a small band of determined searchers to the edge of the ominous forest, a place that had long been whispered about in local legends, but rarely visited by those with a sense of caution. Under a leaden sky, and with hearts heavy with both hope and dread, they stepped into the wilderness, their flashlights slicing through a dense fog that clung to the gnarled trunks like spectral fingers. The forest was a realm unto itself, a place where nature seemed to have forsaken the rules of reality. Every step taken along the narrow, winding trail deepened the sense of foreboding. The canopy overhead was so thick that even the faintest light was swallowed whole, leaving the forest floor in a near-perpetual twilight. The air was chill and heavy with moisture, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and something inexplicably acrid, as if the forest exhaled secrets too terrible to be named. It wasn't long before the searchers began to notice something unnerving. Scattered, irregular footprints pressed into the soft, muddy ground. At first, they appeared to be David's, familiar in their measured stride and the subtle imprint of his shoe. But then they grew erratic, disappearing into patches of undergrowth as if swallowed by the very earth. Each footprint was a silent marker of his presence, a breadcrumb trail that both beckoned them forward and warned them to tread carefully. As they pressed deeper into the forest, the temperature plummeted, and an unnatural silence began to take hold. The usual rustling of small creatures and the distant call of birds were conspicuously absent, replaced by an eerie stillness, punctuated only by the sound of hurried footsteps and the low murmur of anxious voices. Shadows danced at the periphery of their vision, and every now and then, one of the searchers would swear they saw a figure flitting between the trees, a fleeting glimpse of something human, yet impossibly distorted by the murk and mist. The further they advanced, the more the forest seemed to resist their intrusion. Paths that once appeared clear would abruptly vanish, replaced by a tangle of roots and brambles that twisted together in a manner that defied logic. The searchers' flashlights revealed fleeting glimpses of ancient trees whose bark was scarred with inexplicable symbols, as if etched by unseen hands over centuries. At times, the trees themselves seemed to lean inwards, their twisted branches creating archways that felt less like natural formations and more like the threshold of a forbidden chamber. Then came the voices. At first, they were indistinct, a mere whisper blending with the wind. But as the group moved cautiously forward, the whispers grew steadily louder, resonating in the still air as if carried on a spectral current. They murmured unintelligible words, fragments of warnings that sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. One searcher paused, frozen in fear, as the whisper near her ear seemed to say, "Turn back, before it's too late." Others felt as though the forest itself was speaking, its tone both sorrowful and menacing. In a particularly dense clearing, the group discovered more than just footprints. Scattered among the damp leaves lay objects that David had cherished: a notebook, a wristwatch, even a faded photograph of happier times. Each item was arranged as if deliberately left behind, a silent message that David had once been there. But as they gathered the items with trembling hands, a sudden, inexplicable gust of wind swept through the clearing, scattering the mementos and plunging the area into a deeper darkness. Amidst the disarray, a chilling realization began to take shape. The forest was not merely a passive backdrop to David's disappearance. It was an active, malevolent force, a keeper of secrets and a weaver of illusions. Every disoriented twist of the trail, every inexplicable shift in temperature, and every whisper that echoed through the trees suggested that the forest was guarding a dark truth. It was as if it wanted to hide something, to ensure that those who dared enter would leave with nothing but unanswered questions and a lingering sense of dread. Some of the searchers insisted they felt unseen eyes watching them from behind the thick trunks, a persistent presence that made the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. Others reported that their devices, phones, cameras, even portable radios, began to malfunction in the oppressive environment, as though the forest itself interfered with any attempt to record or communicate the reality of what they were experiencing. In the midst of this mounting terror, one of the investigators discovered a narrow, almost imperceptible trail veering off the main path. The trail, marked by deeper, more deliberate footprints, led toward an area where the trees grew so close together that they formed a natural barrier, almost like a secret chamber hidden from the outside world. With hesitant resolve, the group followed the trail, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth and their breaths shallow with anticipation. The deeper they went, the more the forest revealed its dark secret. The whispers evolved into clear, resonant voices, speaking in a cadence that was both alluring and horrifying. They spoke of curses, of debts owed to forces older than time, and of a fate that awaited those who dared disturb the ancient balance. The atmosphere grew so oppressive that it felt as if the forest were bending around them, drawing them deeper into a labyrinth from which there was no return. And then, in a moment that defied all reason, the searchers came upon a clearing so starkly illuminated by a strange, otherworldly light that it seemed to carve itself into the very fabric of the forest. At its center lay a relic, a battered, rusted object that seemed entirely out of place in the natural surroundings. It was a small, old-fashioned box, intricately carved with symbols that resonated with the same eerie language as the trees. The box emanated a low, pulsing hum, as though it were alive and aware of its own dark significance. In that charged moment, every theory, every whispered legend converged into one terrifying possibility. The forest was a conduit, a threshold between the living world and something far more sinister, a realm where the dead, or those taken by forces unknown, might linger and reach out through time and space. David's footprints, the scattered remnants of his personal belongings, the cryptic whispers, they were all part of a puzzle that the forest guarded jealously, a secret that might explain his disappearance once and for all. As the group stood there, trembling under the oppressive weight of the forest's mystery, the truth seemed as elusive as the shifting shadows. The forest held a secret, one that whispered of forbidden bargains and dark destinies. It was a secret that would not be easily unraveled, a truth buried deep beneath layers of spectral fog and ancient sorrow. And as they prepared to document their discovery, the haunting realization settled in. The forest was not merely a backdrop to David's vanishing. It was an active participant in the chilling enigma that had swallowed him whole. In the waning light of a blood-orange sunset, the forest finally revealed its grim secret. After days of relentless searching through twisting, oppressive trails and beneath a canopy that seemed to choke hope itself, the search party stumbled upon a clearing that held the final, harrowing answer. There, beneath the sprawling limbs of an ancient oak, lay David Miller, motionless, as if he had been abandoned by life itself. His skin was ashen, stretched tight over his bone structure, and his eyes stared blankly, wide with a terror that no mortal should bear. Yet there were no visible wounds, no marks of violence. His body bore no sign of trauma, no explanation for the unnatural pallor and eerie stillness that gripped him. Paramedics arrived in a flurry of urgency, their efforts to resuscitate him met with grim futility. Medical examinations revealed nothing that could account for the inexplicable state in which he lay. It was as if the very essence of David had been siphoned away, leaving behind an empty vessel, a shell devoid of the warmth and vitality that once defined him. And then, almost as if to punctuate this unspeakable mystery, a familiar object caught their eyes, his shattered phone lying on the forest floor beside him. The phone's cracked screen glowed dimly, and as the paramedics bent in closer, it displayed a new, bone-chilling message. In stark, unyielding typeface, it read, "They took him, and now they're coming for you." The words pulsed on the screen like a heartbeat, cold, deliberate, and imbued with a malevolent finality. No one present could explain how the device, which had already sent out a desperate plea hours before, could now manifest a message that was clearly not his. The revelation hit like a tidal wave of dread. The disappearance of David was not a mere case of a missing person, but the work of something far darker, something that defied the laws of nature and reason. In the moments that followed, the forest itself seemed to come alive with sinister intent. A palpable chill descended, and the very air grew heavy with the weight of unspeakable secrets. Those gathered felt an overwhelming presence, a force lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. The once familiar surroundings of the clearing twisted into a scene reminiscent of a macabre tableau. Every rustle of leaves and every whisper of wind seemed to carry the echoes of an ancient curse. The forest, it appeared, was not a passive bystander in David's fate, but an active, malevolent entity that had claimed him and was now setting its sights on the living. As the authorities secured the scene and began their somber investigation, whispers of local legends resurfaced, tales of an otherworldly force dwelling in the depths of that cursed woodland, one that ensnared the unsuspecting and dragged them into a realm where death was not the end, but only the beginning of a harrowing new existence. The message on the phone, stark and unyielding, was seen by many as a dire warning, a final communication from a realm beyond our understanding, delivered with the cold precision of a predestined fate. It was a message that defied explanation, challenging the boundaries between life and death, reality and the supernatural. In the aftermath, David's family was left reeling, caught between disbelief and a paralyzing terror that what had occurred was only the first ripple of a far greater, more ominous force. The phone's message became a cursed refrain, echoing in their minds with each passing day. "They took him, and now they're coming for you." It was a call to arms for those who believed that some mysteries are better left unsolved, a stark reminder that the veil between the living and the dead is thinner than we dare imagine. Now, as dusk falls on quiet neighborhoods and the wind whispers through the trees, many cannot help but wonder if the forest's dark secret is dormant, or merely biding its time until it strikes again. The case of David Miller's disappearance, once a simple tragedy, has become a harrowing tale of supernatural horror. It is a reminder that sometimes the true terror lies not in what we can see, but in the unspoken, unseen forces that lurk just beyond the veil of our understanding.